All right, we'll be all right. All right, so for today, we're going to describe the anatomical locations of the anterior and posterior lobes. This is just continued, and also list the hormones that each secretes. Next, we want to describe the actions of the hormones that the pituitary gland secretes, including their contributions to homeostasis. Third, explain how the secretion of each pituitary hormone is regulated. All right, so this pattern, the description of the location, the hormones, their contributions, as well as the secretion, how it's regulated, we are going to do that for every single gland. So that's why your next objective, just understand, it's objectives 1 through 3 for the thyroid gland. You didn't want this slide to be as long as me typing everything on there. Then objective 5 is 1 through 3 for the parathyroid glands. And we'll continue on through the pancreas and other glands as we continue to go. All right. You know what we're doing? Let's check. All right. I know you love me. All right. Which of the following is the primary function of hormones? Guys, this is not hard. C. Controlling metabolic processes. Are they vital to life? Absolutely. All right. Which of the following would not be classified as a steroid hormone? Remember, my other question was which one was that we did last week. What is it? Parathyroid hormone is correct. All the rest of them were derived from cholesterol, and they are steroid hormones. So they are lipid derived. All right, blank hormones are able to easily cross the cell membranes of their target cell. What did you say? Very good. That is going to be steroid hormones. All right. Questions about those questions? All right. Just to kind of bring us back together, we started talking about the anterior pituitary hormones when we were together last. And what is the anterior pituitary made out of? What type of tissue? Epithelial glandular tissue, right? Because we are going to be releasing hormones from it. Whereas the posterior pituitary gland is going to be made out of neuroglia and basically nervous tissue. All right. The anterior pituitary hormones are produced in the anterior lobe by one of 5 types of cells. This is review. And each hormone is released in response to a hypothalamic releasing hormone. Remember, we're having releasing and inhibiting hormones. And yeah, others are inhibited. And then these are our main hormones. This is where we stop. So now I want to go into detail about what is causing the release. So you have to keep in mind, and we're talking about the anterior pituitary gland, we're going to either have release hormones acting on it or inhibiting hormones, which are coming from the hypothalamus. And of course, that's also being controlled by negative feedback systems from the rest of the body. As far as the anterior goes, the posterior is the only one that we're going to have a positive feedback. All right, so we have growth hormone, or GH, and we'll talk more about the effects of this hormone in future slides. All right, so it is going to be released by, look at this, guys, this is what's so easy, growth hormone releasing hormone. Woohoo! All right, so that's going to be GHRH. And it's going to be inhibited by growth hormone inhibiting hormone, or we can also call that somatostatin. Now, somatostatin does come from the hypothalamus, but, and I don't know all the interactions, but just be aware, we will also talk about how somatostatin is released from the D cells of the pancreas. It's that third hormone coming from the pancreas. It is also somatostatin. So that is growth hormone inhibiting hormone. All right, then we have prolactin, and we talked about prolactin releasing factor. Remember, it's a factor because we don't know all the ins and outs about it anyway. It's still called a factor. And so prolactin is going to be inhibited by prolactin inhibiting hormone, or PIH. Then we move on to TSH. We can also call this thyrotropin. And what did we say tropin meant? It's going to act on another gland. It's going to have its effect on another gland, and that's going to have an effect. All right, so we have thyroid stimulating hormone. I'm usually just call it TSH. All right, so it's going to be released by thyrotropin releasing hormone. So TRH releases TSH to release T3 and T4. That's future. All right, And we do not have an inhibiting hormone for that. If I remember correctly, it's primarily controlled by just negative feedback mechanisms, or that's what we know so far. All right, then we have adrenocorticotropic hormone, so another tropic hormone, and we call it ACTH. We can also call it corticotropin. Any of those terms are fine. It's released by corticotropin releasing hormone, or CRH. Then we have follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These two are actually called gonadotropins as a whole because they are acting on another organ, and that's going to be the ovaries or the testes. Now, what releases those is going to be gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH. All right, so you should be aware of these types of things. It's pretty self-explanatory, and remember, it's going to be multiple choice on the exam. All right, so a few more questions, just keeping us all in the same loop. Which of the following is not one of the 3 primary feedback systems of the endocrine system? So this is from the last lecture, trying to keep you up to pace. Very good. That's going to be C. We talked about the hypothalamus and the regulation system that's going to be taking place there, and then the anterior pituitary gland, and then changes in the internal environment, like with glucose and calcium, things like that. All right, number 2, which of the following would not be classified as a steroid hormone? Oh, wait, I already gave you that one. That's easy. All right, tell me what it is. All right, sorry, I repeated. All right, true, false. A non-steroid hormone binds to a receptor on its target cell to activate a second messenger, while a steroid hormone passes through the cell membrane and stimulates the synthesis of proteins. This might be a trick question, so you might have to explain it. Anyone want to take a stab? What's right about it? Good. It has to bind to a receptor. What we saw with CAMP, it activates the G-coupled protein. We get AMP cyclase, and we activate kinases going on down. So that's the second messenger system. What were you going to say, Caleb? Yeah, I thought you were going to say something.
I mean, so far what we've said, yeah, but
okay, so this part is true. Now, you can take this as true or false. It's true because eventually we do get to a protein, but we don't automatically get to a protein. First, we have to bind to either DNA within the nucleus, or there might be a binding point within the cytoplasm. But what we are going to do is we are going to get the transcription of genes to get to mRNA to get to the protein eventually. All right, so just to make you think. You're doing great. All right, here comes my favorite diagram again. All right, so how many, be honest with me, it's okay if you didn't. How many of you all looked at this since our last lecture? Oh, well, I'm proud of you. Good job. For those of you that didn't, it's okay. You still have time, right? We're all good. All right, so this is talking about exactly what we talked about, and this helps you to, I think, appreciate the diagram even more because you can see even here, we see which ones are activating and which ones are inhibiting. So it shows you each hormone and its action on the anterior pituitary hormones. Now, the thing that this does not talk about is the posterior pituitary, but it's a little bit different mechanism of action, so we'll cover that here in a little bit. And then each one of the glands. And so what we want to do next, next, is we're going to go through each one of those hormones to help you better understand the effect. And when you understand the effect, it will be very easy for you to remember which which organs they're going to act on. You ready? I did not sound enthusiastic. Yes! All right, thank you. All right, so growth hormone is going to be the first one. We can also call it somatotropin. Oh, that kind of makes you think of the somatostatin, which inhibit it. Anyway, all right, so listen to this, growth hormone. And this, I think this explanation will help you to understand why some people abuse it, but Dr. Amos does not recommend it. All right, so it stimulates cells to enlarge and divide rapidly. Did bodybuilders want that? Yeah, absolutely. All right, and so it's going to increase amino acid uptake and protein synthesis. Do bodybuilders want that? Yeah, and it also decreases the rate of carbohydrate use. So if we're not using carbohydrates, we're producing more amino acids. Then what are we getting rid of? that. And do people want that are building muscle? Absolutely. But are there a lot of negative impacts from growth hormone? Yes, we talked about how it can change feminine or male features and whatnot. So don't do it. All right, next, prolactin. All right, just like think about lactose, which is in milk. So prolactin stimulates milk production in females. In males, it's kind of, we're not 100% sure everything that it does. So don't worry about that. All right, I also provided little pictures for you on the side. So a little bit are kind of, I guess, inaccurate. That's not that type of milk. But anyway, all right, so thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. It is going to stimulate the secretion of the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about that in just a little bit. And this is going to be coming from the thyroid gland. Why do you think I have fire right there? Yeah, energy, and they use, fire, think about metabolism, burning up, chemical reactions, a lot of energy. That's why people with thyroid issues, they talk about how their metabolism is either to pot or it's really, really high. Usually that's a thyroid issue, and it's T3 and T4. All right, looking at the adrenocorticotropic hormone. This is going to stimulate secretion of other glucocorticoids, and cortisol is going to be one of those, and that comes from the adrenal cortex. This is going to be a stretch. Do any of you guys remember you had your adrenal cortex, and you had 3 zones that were there. You had the capsule, and then you had 3 zones. Does anyone remember the zones? The fasciculata, what was that one? There. That was the middle one, very good. Reticularis, very good. That was the closest one to the adrenomedulla. You're doing great, Ryan. You got the top one? It does start with a G. What is it? Glomerulosa. Very good. Now, I did explain it to my second group. I don't think I hit it with the first one because I knew we were going to do it in here. Do you know where the glucocorticoids come from? Is it the top, middle, or the last layer? It was the middle one. This is going to be the zona fasciculata. You want to think aldosterone is the top layer because it's salt, sugar, and sex. So aldosterone is the top layer. Glucocorticoids, including cortisol, is the zona fasciculata. Zona reticularis is going to be the androgens, which are precursors to sex hormones. So salt, sugar, sex. All right. And then we have follicle stimulating hormone. All right, so this is important. It's going to act on male and female, and it is going to cause growth and development of the ovarian follicles. Oh, look, follicle stimulating hormone, growth of follicles. That goes together in females. And then in males don't really have follicles, but they do have sperm. So it's going to activate sperm production. So that is follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and it is a gonadotropin. The very last hormone that we want to talk about is luteinizing hormone, or LH. And this is going to cause ovulation in the female, so that's basically the release of the egg. And it also is going to cause sex hormone production of the gonads in both sexes. So obviously testosterone, and you have a specific type of cell that we'll talk about in the reproductive system that's going to be activated from it in males, and then the same for females. At females, it's going to be one of 3 different types of estrogen. All right, questions? Yep, there's 1, 2, and 3, and depending on what phase you are in life, you release different types of estrogen. We can talk more later if you want. All right. So thinking about growth hormone, and this goes over even a little bit more than what we talked about, I think last time we were together. So we can have hypopituitary dwarfism, and this is going to be caused by a deficiency, go figure, of growth hormone, human growth hormone during childhood. So notice this is during childhood. So during childhood, it's very important to have growth hormone because that's before the epiphyseal plate has sealed. If it's not there, even though the plate isn't sealed, we're not going to have that stimulation of bone to be growing, cartilage, and all of that stuff. So the person ends up being short-statured, but normal body proportions and mental development. I have had people ask me if I had this. I do not. I am a little bit shorter than 5 foot, so I am a legal midget, but I am not a dwarf. All right, just put that out there. One of my friends used to, in junior high, I will never forget it. The first thing he looked at me, he goes, you know, you could be the giant of the pygmies. And I'm like, thank you. Great one. Nice to meet you. You know who the pygmy people are. They're like a specific nation where everybody is like a dwarf, basically. So yeah, anyway. Okay, so HGH treatment, as we talked about, I knew a student that had done it. It needs to be started prior to the sealing of that epiphyseal plate. Otherwise, it's not going to help them out much. All right, so we have gigantism. I mentioned this to you, I think last time we were together, we were talking about acromegaly and gigantism. Gigantism occurs during childhood, and is caused by an oversecretion of growth hormone. So the height can exceed 8 feet tall. That's crazy. But they may have other metabolic problems because you think about all of the organs that that's affecting, not just the bones as an organ. All right, it's often caused by a pituitary tumor, and that's actually what the kid that I knew, he had a tumor. Anyway, so that is gigantism, and you can see some pictures over there, which is kind of crazy. Now, acromegaly, this is caused by an oversecretion of growth hormone during adult after the epiphyseal plate has sealed, or epiphyseal ossification. But just talking about the growth plate. All right, there's no increase in height within this individual. So what I was talking about before when I talked about basketball, just understand these people may be really tall. You would not expect someone to have dwarfism or be really short and have this. It just doesn't usually happen. But what really happens is the bones are going to thicken. And I mean, this is way more than someone saying they're thick bone. This is way, way more than that. So this can cause an enlargement of the tongue, which is a muscle. I know. The nose, hands, feet, jaw, heart, and thyroid gland. Because you think about it, this is during adulthood. Again, that epiphyseal plate is sealed. So what can the bones do? They can just thicken. And you're going to have, it looks like muscle thickening as well. There can be heart defects and things that go along with this, which is not good. But that's an example of a person with this. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about thyroid hormones, but are we doing pretty good so far? All right, great. You doing okay, Sawyer?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. You got Jolly Ranchers to make you happy, if not.
That's right. That's right.
All right, so let's think about TRH. TRH is what? Thyroid releasing hormone. And what is it secreted by since it's a releasing hormone? The hypothalamus. Thank you. All right. So we're seeing a negative feedback cycle over here. I want to talk about it. So TRH is going to cause the anterior pituitary gland to secrete TSH, right? And what is TSH? Very good. Thyroid stimulating hormone. So we're not done there, though. All right. So TSH is going to travel. How's it going to travel? Through the what? Very good. Through the bloodstream. And it's going to bind to its target on the thyroid, and it's going to cause the thyroid to secrete hormones. All right, so it exerts its effects on its target cells dealing with metabolism. But if you think about it, and you can see this chart, this is another really great example of a negative feedback mechanism. So we can see TRH is acting on the anterior pituitary gland. Then we have THS that is secreted as it goes through the bloodstream. If we have an increased amount of TSH over more than what we need, what's it going to do? It's going to come back up and it's going to inhibit the hypothalamus as well as the anterior pituitary. But then we also come down and we're going to be releasing thyroid hormone. So that's going to be T3 and T4, not calcitonin. That's dealing with calcium in the blood. That's what it's activated by. All right, so T3 and T4, that goes to its target cells. So once it elicits its effect, once we reach to where we are in range, we don't want to overshoot, then we're going to go back and we're going to inhibit. So it kind of stops that pathway. But this can be started at any time based on what the body needs. Make sense? All right. All right. So we just talked about the two methods in which, in the levels where it's going to be secreted. And this is a positive or negative feedback mechanism? Negative feedback mechanism. All right. That's the anterior pituitary hormones. Now we want to look at the posterior. So the posterior lobe is going to have neuroglia as well as nerve fibers from the hypothalamus. That's how it's going to interact. And remember, the anterior was glandular epithelium because it was dealing a lot more with the production and the secretion of hormones directly from the anterior pituitary. So two hormones that are produced in the hypothalamus. The posterior pituitary gland does not produce its own hormones. I will have that on the exam. But it does store them and release them. Hence, I had it underlined there. All right. So these hormones are going to be transported from the hypothalamus whenever it is stimulated by the pituitary stalk or the infundibulum. And these two hormones are going to be antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. So antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, look at it. We talked about it before, antidiuretic. So it is going to cause for water to be reabsorbed in the body, and therefore you're not going to pee as much. It can also be called vasopressin because of its impact on the vascular system, so on the blood vessels. So it decreases urine production by reducing the volume of water that the kidneys are actually going to excrete and release through the nephron and into your urine. It's going to also cause vasoconstriction. If we constrict the blood vessels, what's that going to do to blood pressure? It's going to increase it. All right. Hence vasopressin, or pressin on the vessels, you know. All right. And then we have oxytocin. I think we already know this, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So it's going to cause smooth muscle contraction in the uterine wall. This is during childbirth. So we know that based on what we talked about with positive feedback. But it also causes milk ejection during lactation of the female. Obviously, the male, no certain function, but they think that it may actually aid in sperm movement or sexual response. Now, this is kind of interesting. It causes milk ejection during lactation. So I've actually heard testimonies of this happening. So when a female is like feeding their child, whenever she is lactating, if she hears the cry of her child, that actually stimulates oxytocin, and she will start lactating, whether the child is present or not. And you know what else is crazy? Hearing the cry of another child can also stimulate oxytocin release. And there are other sexual functions too with arousal, but we're not talking about that right now. We don't have to. All right, so this is a nice chart that talks about the action as well as the source of control. You don't need to know anything more than what I just discussed with you. The chart has a little bit more added details, which is out. All right. I told you we go back more to the thyroid gland. All right, we got two lateral lobes, right? We have the right lobe and we have the left lobe. You should make sure that you're looking at anatomical position so you know which lobe is the right and which one is the left. You can also check your hands, right? I'll be honest, I cheat all the time, and I do that. This is my left side because it says L. This is my right side. It's easy. All right, so the thyroid gland is going to lie right below the larynx. And it's going to be anterior and lateral to the trachea. You should know where it is. That is the anatomy, but you should know that. All right. It has a special ability to remove iodine from the blood. Hence, if you think about the names, this one is actually, it can be called, I didn't put it up here, I don't think. No. Tetraiodothyronine. But this one is T3. Triiodothyronine, and that's based on how much iodine it is going to actually be able to bind. That's why people have issues if there's something wrong. They have issues with the concentration of iodine if there's something wrong with the thyroid gland, and you may see somebody develop kind of like a goiter, and that's based on iodine concentration. But anyway, so T4 is going to be produced by the follicular cells, and so is T3. So, in the thyroid gland, T4 is produced more so than T3. You're going to have a higher concentration of T4 than T3. But we can create more T3, and that's due to a process that can be done in the liver. T3 is actually a lot more potent. It's a lot more active than T4 is. So your body can kind of regulate that based on how much it's producing in liver's action. That's just a little side note. Now, we know the thyroid gland produces 3 hormones. We have T4 and T3 coming from the follicular cells. Where is calcitonin produced? The extrafollicular cells or parafollicular cells or C cells. Very good. Not to be confused with seashells in the sea. All right. So thyroid is going to be composed of round secretory units, and we called those follicles. You guys labeled this exact image in the lab. So looking over here, this right here is a follicle. I think I had the arrows up a little further, but that's okay. This whole thing is a follicle. Right outside of the follicle is going to be follicular cells producing T3 and T4. Within the follicle, what's in there? Colloid fluid. So that's going to contain proteins and things to finish out the synthesis of T3 and T4. And then we also have around the sides extrafollicular or C cells or parafollicular cells out here. So these are follicular cells. This is a follicle right here. And then we have extrafollicular cells and colloid fluid. You'll have to label that in lab. You should just kind of be aware of what I have on here for lecture. And here's another picture. I think you labeled this exact one, pretty close to it for lab. All right. All right, so these are looking at the hormones of the thyroid gland. Again, just a little bit more information than what I gave you. Oh, sorry, I didn't even talk too much about that. But just as a reminder, so calcitonin, its release is going to be activated by high levels of calcium in the blood. You want to think about how we're toning it down. So we're going to tone it down, but where's that calcium going to go? We have excess calcium in the blood. Very good. We're going to be combining it with phosphate and some other factors to create hydroxyapatite within the bones. So the bones is actually, you don't think about this, it's a storage organ. It's a storage organ for different minerals. Kind of a fun fact, but not so fun for a pregnant female. But because the baby is the #1 priority in the female's body, it's actually very important that she ensures she gets an extra amount of calcium because that baby is growing. Its bones are growing, muscles, all of that. And so it needs quite a bit of calcium. Guess what the mother's body does? Self-sacrifices its calcium. So it's very easy for a female, your teeth also contain calcium. It's very easy for the female to deplete herself of calcium if she doesn't take enough. And bones can become weaker, and teeth can actually, you can actually start, I don't know from experience, but you can actually kind of feel where they start to become a little more painful and they're not as strong until you get, more calcium in you. But it's something that you might want to think about. All right, so that's calcitonin. Yay, hormones of the thyroid gland. Over here, I gave you a chart talking about the mechanism of hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism and some different conditions that are associated with that. I know. These are different conditions talking about that here. And you can kind of match those up on your own. At this point, I do want to take the time because I've put up a couple of slides looking at conditions where we've had hyposecretion, so below, or hypersecretion of your different hormones and the effects from those. So I went into detail about growth hormone. Has anyone noticed the assignment that I put up on for the discussion post? Okay, a few people did. I put up, you don't need to look at it now. Okay, a lot of you can't. But I did put up an assignment, so I'm going to take the time to kind of describe it to you right now so you can kind of think about this. So you and potentially a partner are going to work together, or you can work by yourself, I don't care, and you're going to choose one of the conditions that I have posted on an Excel sheet. So you have the assignment where you're going to turn it in. I have instructions down below on a Word doc and an Excel sheet. The Excel sheet has a variety of different conditions you can choose. You can use some of the information that I put in this PowerPoint. You just need to either cite the book or cite my PowerPoint. I don't care how you do it. And you're going to talk about that condition. I give you specific, listen to me, in the instructions. I tell you what you're going to do. I even gave you what I'm using as a rubric so you can figure out how many points each one of them words worth. And you do get points for your name, so don't forget to put your partner's name if you use a partner to do that. So you're going to be discussing these conditions. You will have to create citations. That is not due for at least a week and a half. All right, so I give you quite a bit of time to do it. It's September the 7th. And then after you submit your original response, the next week everyone as an individual, I don't care if you work with a partner or not, you as an individual need to respond to 2 different people that did not do the same condition as you. So it is very helpful for you guys to choose different conditions so you have enough people to respond to in your replies. You guys are so small, I would appreciate if you would all try to pick a different condition. If there's an overlap of a couple of them, that's okay. But the sooner you get started, the sooner you put up your posts, the safer you are in picking out your condition. So just kind of be thinking about that. All right, looking at this. So with hyperthyroidism, and just having a hyperthyroid. So we have hyperthyroidism, and there's also Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disorder. Have you guys heard of these before? No? Yes? Yeah. All right, so with hyperthyroidism, it was a high metabolic rate, sensitivity to heat, restlessness, hyperactivity, weight loss, protruding eyes, and potentially a goiter. So you can kind of guess which one might be associated with that, or Graves' disease. So if this is an autoimmune disorder, we're going to have autoantibodies, and so that means destructive to self. So they're going to bind to THS receptors, so thyroid stimulating hormone receptors on the thyroid cell, and they mimic the action of TSH. So if they mimic the action of TSH, they're binding to it, they're causing an overstimulation of the gland, and this can lead to protrusion of the eyes as well as a goiter development. I had students when I was in Florida, actually a couple of them where their mother had this. It is more common in females than it is in males. No one. All right, now dealing with hypothyroid, so less activity of the thyroid gland. We have Hashimoto's disease. So this is another autoimmune disorder where antibodies are destroying the thyroid cells, resulting in the hypothyroidism. If they're not present, can't secrete their hormones. And then infantile hypothyroidism deals with stunted growth, abnormal bone formation, intellectual disability, and sluggishness. And then we have it within the adult. So this results in a low metabolic rate, sensitivity to cold, sluggishness, poor appetite, swollen tissues, and mental dullness. And then we have a simple goiter. Now look, remember what I talked about with iodine? All right, so this is a deficiency of the thyroid hormones because there's an iodine deficiency. Remember, iodine is how we're creating T3 and T4. It's what it's binding to. So, and that's because no thyroid hormones inhibit the pituitary release of TSH. So the thyroid is overstimulated and enlarged, but it functions below normal, hence hypothyroidism. So you can go into a lot more detail about these diseases. I think it's kind of obvious which one goes with which, but that's dealing with unfortunate issues with the thyroid gland. All right. How is growth hormone secreted and how is it inhibited? Go ahead. Yep. Growth hormone releasing hormone is how it's stimulated, and then somatostatin or growth hormone inhibiting hormone, GHIH, is going to be how it's inhibited. Very good. Which of the following describes the role of ACTH? Adrenocorticotropic hormone. Very good. It's going to be B. It's going to be secreting hormones of the adrenal gland, and since it's the corticotropins, glucocorticoids, that's going to be from the zona fasciculata. Good. All right, 3, true, false. Thyroid hormones and steroid hormones are able to cross the cell membrane barrier without help and stimulate or inhibit the hormone's effect. It's true or false? Why is it false? All right, so this is where it's okay. You're half correct. Steroid hormones, absolutely, they are lipid-derived. Thyroid hormones, we don't know a ton about them, but we do know they are able to cross the cell membrane without help. But it's still, to the last time I checked, it was still in the research. But you're absolutely correct. I like your idea, thinking about these steroid hormones. All right, let's try to get through the parathyroid glands. So these are located on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. Typically, we have 4. You can see them. They're cute little pink jelly bean looking things. All right. So they release PTH or parathyroid hormone. Is that the only hormone they release? Shake your head like this. Yes, it is. That's the only hormone that they release. All right. So PTH is going to be important. It is basically the opposite of calcitonin, but it is going to regulate calcium and phosphate concentrations within the blood. So if calcitonin toned down calcium by causing calcium to basically be absorbed by bone, what is parathyroid hormone going to do? What's one thing it's going to do? It's going to strip the bone of calcium so that we can have more within the blood. Because remember, calcium is important for bones, but what else do you have to have calcium for? Muscle movement, muscle contraction, also nervous impulses. That's going to be driven by calcium. So bones are important, but your body's going to prioritize being able to move and using the nervous system prior to that. All right, so other actions. So like we said, so it's going to increase blood calcium concentration. It actually decreases phosphate concentration within the blood. It acts on the bones, kidneys, and the intestines. So it causes bone resorption. Notice there's no absorption there, right? Bone resorption is talking about the removal of calcium. It's also going to act on the kidney. So the kidney is very important for the activation of vitamin D. Active vitamin D is important for calcium absorption within the intestine. So it's going to help to activate vitamin D. And it's dihydrocholecalciferol, if you wanted to know. All right, calcitriol is another name for it. And that's why you can find the little tablets. I take calcitriol too. Anyway, all right, so it's going to act on the kidney. And also, so you think about the kidney as a filtration system. And we'll hit this again when we get to renal. But it's going to conserve calcium. Why is that important? Why was PTH stimulated in the first place? Low blood calcium levels. Do you want to pee out your calcium if you're low in the blood? No. So we're going to conserve that. Now we are getting rid of phosphate. So we are going to excrete more phosphate in the urine. All right. It also is going to indirectly stimulate calcium absorption by stimulating a step in vitamin D metabolism, which is what we were kind of referring to up there. So this is just kind of a little stair step of looking at this action, PTH. All right, so looking at parathyroid hormone, I think this kind of helps thinking about levels within the bloodstream and what that's going to stimulate, what that is going to do to calcium. And then for your exam, basically just understand it's basically the opposite effect for phosphate in comparison to calcium for PTH. All right, thinking about the parathyroid gland, we have both hyperparathyroidism, which deals with, it's usually the cause of a tumor, fatigue, muscular weakness, painful joints, weight loss, bone weakening, increased PTH secretion, and that's going to overstimulate osteoclast. So is that going to help you keep strong bones? Nope. All right, so how are we going to treat this if it was by a tumor? Remove the tumor and try the best we can to correct any bone deformities that are there. And based on the age of the individual, there's different treatment methods that we would try to put in place. Hypoparathyroidism can cause muscle cramp seizures, decrease PTH secretion, reducing osteoclast activity, diminishing blood calcium and ion concentration. So surgical removal can be helpful if it's injury. And then we have different means of treating hypoparathyroidism. All right, last 3 questions. I have a lot of questions today. What does the parathyroid gland directly affect by hormone action? What'd you say? C. It affects the bones, the kidneys, and the intestines. What does it do to bones? Parathyroid? It what? It strips the bone of calcium. Not the greatest thing for your bones, but helpful to your nervous system and muscles. What does it do to the kidney? Activation of vitamin D, and remember it changes how much calcium is released in the urine. We're going to try to reabsorb it. And the intestines, what does that help with? Think small intestine. Absorption. Because we're going to absorb in the intestine, that goes into the bloodstream. Yep. And that's coming from food. All right. Corticotropin releasing hormone is created in the blank, which stimulates blank, which will stimulate the adrenal glands to secrete their hormones. Where is a releasing hormone going to be? Tip-top level. Hypothalamus. Now, all right, so that's created in the hypothalamus, and that is going to stimulate what gland? Anterior pituitary gland. And that's going to head down to that's your corticotropins, will stimulate the adrenal glands to secrete their hormones like cortisol and the glucocorticoids. All right, last question. The blank stores and releases oxytocin and ADH, but the blank creates it. What stores it? Posterior pituitary gland, and then what creates it? The hypothalamus. That was a whole lot of information today, wasn't it? That's all. All right, so I did put up your clinical application case study type of thing. I said it would be posted by Friday. I went ahead and put it up, so you can look at it ahead of time. The due date will stay the same. Homework for Chapter 13 is on the 7th. Lab homework is due next Monday if you haven't turned it in. Your exam is on September 10th. And your quiz is on Friday, Lord willing. Have a good day.